Welcome to this explainer. You know that feeling, right? You log into your CMMS and bam, you're hit with a massive wall of thousands of open red flag tasks. It's instant anxiety. Well, you're absolutely in the right place because today we're mastering maintenance backlog management and CMMS health. We're tackling a pain point that literally plagues maintenance teams all over the world, an unmanageable system that just feels like it's dictating your every move. The core thesis we're exploring today is pretty simple but powerful. Your maintenance backlog isn't just a volume issue, it's a blinking red signal that you've lost control. When your system is overloaded like that, it's not just about having too much work on your plate, it actually means the very credibility of your system is compromised.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll uncover the real backlog problem. Then, we'll walk through what we call the 90-day purge. Third, we're going to establish the KPIs that actually matter. And finally, we'll lock in the lifestyle changes needed for preventing regrowth.
All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the real backlog problem, volume versus decay. Because look, I totally validate the frustration a lot of you are feeling. The struggle usually isn't a lack of data, it's drowning in way too much of the wrong data, which completely erodes trust in the system. Okay, let's dive into this. Consider this stark, kind of medical-style reality. If your backlog has birthdays, you don't have a backlog, you have a graveyard. Think about that. This is way beyond just an administrative annoyance. It's a full-on operational failure. A work order that's a year old, that's no longer a planned task. It's basically an artifact of hesitation just eating up valuable space. When your backlog is stuffed with outdated, duplicated, or totally irrelevant work, it quietly destroys trust across your entire CMMS. And once that trust is gone, planners stop relying on the system, technicians stop believing the priorities, and honestly, the whole thing just becomes noise. Which brings us to an incredibly important definition: zombie work orders. These are those lingering tasks that just remain open, totally untouched, for months on end. These zombies are the ultimate symptom of system decay. They just wander around your CMMS, distorting your KPIs, hiding your true labor capacity, and completely confusing your teams. If we're going to fix this, we have to start by exterminating these zombies, not just putting our heads down and trying to work faster. You see, the big myth out there is that backlog is a volume problem. But the reality? Backlog is a decay problem. Look at it like this. A backlog of 500 work orders can actually be perfectly healthy if and only if they're well prioritized, actively planned, and recently submitted. On the flip side, a tiny backlog of just 150 work orders is completely dysfunctional if half of them are over 6 months old. So many teams focus entirely on throughput, trying to frantically rush through the volume, instead of looking at the actual quality and health of the backlog itself. And that leads us to this vital number, 2 to 6 weeks. According to industry benchmark data from SMRP, a mature, healthy organization should target a planned backlog of exactly that, 2 to 6 weeks. This gives you a really solid, measurable vital sign. Anything pushing past that 6-week mark, especially when it's all tangled up with those year-old zombie work orders we just talked about, is a major blinking warning sign of severe system decay. Moving on to section 2. The surgery, or as we like to call it, the 90-day purge. So we're shifting from diagnosis to active intervention here. If your backlog is a graveyard, we need a controlled reset to figure out what actually matters. Here is the 4-step surgical procedure. Step 1, define the cutoff rule. This is totally non-negotiable. Any work order older than 90 days with 0 activity has to be reviewed. It's a strict forcing function. Step 2, classify all that stale work. Is it still valid? Is it a duplicate? Do we even need to do this anymore? Step 3, apply the kill, fix, or keep logic. You literally either delete the irrelevant stuff, update the scope of what's fixable, or keep it, but only if current asset conditions justify it. And finally, step 4, reset your KPIs and governance. This isn't just a spring cleaning, it's a full-blown system recovery. Now, if you execute those 4 steps correctly, expect to remove 20% to 40% of your total backlog volume in that very first purge. I really want to highlight this because leaders tend to absolutely panic when they see thousands of work hours just vanish from the system overnight. But let me reassure you, a massive drop in volume like that is completely normal. In fact, it's the exact intended outcome of that kill, fix, or keep phase. You're just clearing out the noise. All right, section 3, the vital signs. Let's look at the KPIs that actually matter. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it shifts our focus. Most teams mistakenly track the sheer size of their backlog, which just leads to unnecessary panic. Instead, we need to track backlog health with metrics that actually drive behavior change. Let's break down these 4 vital signs. First, Your backlog in weeks should be, as we said, 2 to 6 weeks. Pushing above 8 weeks means you're just overloading your labor capacity. Second, your backlog aging distribution. Less than 10% of your work should be older than 90 days. Bottom line, if you aren't tracking age, you simply don't control quality. Third, your planned work ratio should sit right at 80%. And fourth, closure quality absolutely must be 100% with completion data. Poor closure is exactly what spawns those zombie work orders we just purged. Notice how the classic 80-20 rule applies perfectly to maintenance work here. 80% of your work should be properly prepared and planned before execution, leaving only that 20% buffer for unplanned or emergency situations. Why does this matter so much for your backlog? Well, because low planning rates artificially inflate the whole thing. When tasks aren't planned, technicians are out there lacking parts or instructions, the work gets delayed, rework happens, and suddenly the backlog just spirals into complete chaos. I want to pause here for a second because this concept requires a massive operational mindset shift. You have to measure your backlog in weeks of work, not the sheer number of work orders. Honestly, having 300 work orders means literally nothing if we don't know the actual labor required to complete them. By calculating your total planned work hours and dividing that by your available labor capacity, you get a measurement in weeks. This accurately gauges your reality. It tells you if you genuinely need to hire more staff or if you just really need better prioritization. Which brings us to our final part, Section 4, the lifestyle change, preventing backlog regrowth. Look, reducing your backlog is actually the easy part. It's keeping it that way that's hard. Without strict governance, all that decay you just painstakingly cleared out is going to creep right back in within 3 to 6 months. So, here are the 3 structural controls that act as your preventative lifestyle change. First, control the work request gate. Not everything gets to be a work order. Second, prioritize based on risk. And third, enforce weekly backlog review routines. Seriously, a highly focused 30-minute review every single week, just looking at new entries and aging work orders, will absolutely prevent months of massive accumulation down the road. Discipline here beats any fancy software tool, hands down. Let's look a bit closer at that second control about prioritization. Here's the truth. Urgency is emotional, but risk is measurable. Traditionally, teams operate on who yells the loudest, right? That's emotional urgency. But a healthy CMMS operates on measurable risk. You have to use asset criticality rankings, failure consequence analysis, and production impact to actually schedule your work. Doing this scientifically avoids polluting your newly clean backlog with low-value, highly emotional requests. And that leads perfectly to this very direct, highly authoritative rule. Rejecting work is part of maintenance management. I really want leaders to absorb this one. It is absolutely okay to say no. A CMMS is not just some digital filing cabinet for every passing thought or minor complaint on the factory floor. Hesitation to reject invalid or low-priority requests is exactly what inflates backlogs in the first place. You have to actively guard that gate. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from diagnosing those zombie work orders to executing a ruthless 90-day purge and setting up strict gatekeeping. I want to conclude this explainer by leaving you with one final provocative question to really challenge your perspective moving forward. Are you managing backlog volume, or are you managing backlog quality? Stop letting the sheer number of tasks dictate your stress levels and start ruthlessly managing the health, relevance, and accuracy of your system. Thanks so much for focusing in with me today, and good luck taking back control of your CMMS.